All right, guys. From time to time, you're going to have a buyer that's going to tell you that what they're looking for, what they're interested in, is a lease purchase. They might call it a lease to own. They might call it a rent to own. Goes under several different names, but they all mean the same thing and point back to. And I want you guys to be in a position to understand what that is, how that's structured, how that works, what the pros and cons are of it, so that you can explain it to your client, be it a buyer or a seller, and whether or not that's a good model for them to pursue. So, going to jump right into our slideshow. So, when we talk about understanding lease purchases, what is it that we mean? Okay. Well, it's really nothing more than a purchase contract combined with a lease contract. Okay. It's two things. It's considered a lease with an option to buy or a lease with a commitment to buy. Okay. And the contracts themselves are set up that way. So we're going to use our normal purchase and sale agreement, okay, the F201, but it has an extra exhibit, okay, and that's a lease purchase and sale exhibit. And what that lease purchase and sale exhibit says is that this purchase and sale agreement is being used in conjunction with a lease agreement. Okay, and it sets up certain parameters, certain cost, certain rules that have to be followed by both parties for the duration of this contract. And very often what we're doing is we're agreeing to buy a property 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, whatever it is that we negotiate. Okay, and in the interim, the buyer is going to be leasing the property from the seller. Okay, so we have our purchase and sale agreement with the lease purchase and sale exhibit that says there's not just a purchase agreement, there's also a lease, which means our second document is our lease. Okay, and we need to use the one that's specifically created for lease purchase agreements. Okay, so when you go look up your leases, there's just your lease, and then there's a lease for lease purchase agreement exhibits. And those two documents work in tandem, and they define everything. What's the purchase price going to be? What's option money is there? What the rent going to be every month? How much are the late fees? When's rent due? Where is it paid? And the responsibilities of both the seller or landlord, okay, and the buyer or tenant, okay. So why do a lease purchase? Why do people ask about lease purchases? And the answer is different on each side of the transaction. Well, if it's a buyer, it's typically because they can't get a house to buy. They either have credit issues, okay, and their credit's not quite where it needs to be in order to buy. They probably want to buy. They've tried to buy, okay, tried to get pre-qualified, couldn't. They've got some work to do, okay, or their credit's fine. They just don't have enough money for the down payment, enough money for their closing costs, and they're looking for another way to get to home ownership. For the seller, okay, usually when they want to entertain a lease purchase, is they don't see that they're going to be able to sell the property for enough. And typically a buyer with challenged credit is willing to pay more at some point in the future than you can buy for in today's market. Okay. The other possibility is that's what they do. Okay. That seller has a business model. Okay. And this is where we really get into the crux of why I'm not a fan of lease purchases. Okay. Because there's a seedy side to lease purchases. There are sellers out there that their business model is they market a property as a rent to own or a lease purchase or a lease to own, knowing that odds are that that buyer is never going to buy the property. They're never going to be in a position to buy the property. Okay. And they want to reap the benefits of the lease purchase in terms of higher rents and the buyer taking better care of the property because they've taken ownership of the property. And then when it's determined that that buyer can't buy, that buyer leaves and they do it all over again. And they collect a higher rent with the next one, collect the option money from the next one. And you'll understand this a little bit better. But for a seller, they're typically going to get more cash in their pocket versus renting a loan. Okay. But their model is to fill people with hope, charge them over what they should as far as a rental goes. Okay. Keep that money and then do it again. Okay. And it's not a business model I'm fond of. Okay. Because I feel like in a lot of ways they're taking advantage of an uneducated marketplace. And that's part of what this video is going to do for you. Is this going to help you educate the buyer what they're getting into and know how they can be taken advantage of and why so often a lease purchase is a really bad decision for them. Okay. So, and that's the thing that I want you to know. For most individuals, okay, by far the majority, on the buy side and on the sell side, lease purchases are a bad idea. Okay. Approximately 90% of lease purchases, or at least that's what the statistic used to be, never result in the sale of a property. Okay. So why would you knowingly go into a contract with the expectation that it's going to fail? You're probably not doing very many things in your life that you know that there's a 90% chance of failure. Okay. It's just generally not a good idea. And this is really no different. So let's break these down. Let's talk about from a seller standpoint, what are the pros of a lease purchase and what are the cons of a lease purchase? Okay. Well, one of the big pros for a seller is typically the buyer is going to take better care of a property because they think of it as their house. It's the house that they're buying, right? So they treat it better than a property they know that they're just renting and are going to have for a temporary period of time. They're thinking they're going to be in that home for the next 10 years, 20 years. And so they have a tendency to take better care of it. Well, as a seller, that's appealing to me. Okay. Somebody taking better care of my property, that's desirable. Okay. Two, I potentially am going to get more money. Okay. And that happens in a lot of ways. One, we think of it as a lease with an option to buy. Very often people going into a lease purchase, they are putting money down up front that is option money. Okay. This is money that's non-refundable. Okay. It goes toward the purchase of the house. Okay. And those individuals that have poor credit but maybe have some cash savings are the ones that end up in these situations where they give a seller $5,000 today. They agree to pay an extra $200 a month in rent above what they would normally pay, with that $200 going toward their purchase of the property. Okay. So as a seller, if I'm going to put a tenant in a property for 2 years and they're going to give me $5,000 extra dollars up front and $200 extra dollars every single month, that could be a good deal. Okay. Again, I don't like it for that reason. I'm pretty protective of my buyers, but for your seller, that may be something that works for them. Okay. And understand it is money that they deserve if they're doing it with good intentions. And what I mean by that is if their hope and desire is that the buyer actually buys the property, and they're giving them a pathway to do that, that's great. If the seller is going into this with the hope and expectation that the buyer fails and they just get to keep that extra money, I'm not a fan of that. Okay. Another reason that it's good for sellers is it probably won't close. So that extra money that they got every month, they get to keep. Okay. That can also be bad. Okay. So on the cons, we might guess wrong. Okay. And I know that's really vague, so let me walk you through what I mean by that. When we set up a lease purchase agreement, okay, we're agreeing today that the buyer's going to buy the property in 3 years for X number of dollars. Okay, and let's just pick 300,000 for our conversation. So we sign a lease purchase agreement. They're going to rent it for the next 3 years, and prior to those 3 years ending, they're going to buy the property for $300,000. Okay, well, what if the market's really robust and does really well over the next 3 years? And in 3 years, the property's worth $350,000. Well, what do I have to sell the property for? $300,000. I lost out on $50,000 of potential by signing a contract 3 years earlier that said I would sell it for $300,000. Okay, so if the market does really well, the seller loses. Okay. Second scenario, we agree that the seller is going to sell the property to the buyer for $300,000 in 3 years, and the market does not do very well. Home prices actually go down. Property's probably worth $275 when you write the contract. Okay, but we're thinking in 3 years it's going to be worth $300,000. But the market is a little bit shaky, and prices drop to $250,000. Okay, is the buyer going to be able to buy the home? Okay, well, the property is only going to appraise for $250,000. Okay, is the buyer going to have an extra $50,000 sitting around to give in cash to buy the property? Probably not. Okay, and so they're going to end up having to exit the contract. Okay, now they're going to give up any extra rent they paid. They're going to give up any option money that they paid when they do that. But what do I have now as a seller? I've got a property I could have sold for $275,000 3 years ago that now 3 years later is only worth $250,000. Okay, and again I lose. So unless I'm really good at guessing today what the property is going to be worth in 3 years, I'm going to lose, whether the market does well or the market does bad. Okay, and over that period of time, my options are limited. Okay, I can't get out of this. Okay, now that doesn't mean I can't sell my property. Okay, anytime during those 3 years, I could sell my property to somebody else, but the lease and the purchase agreement transfer with the sale. Okay, the same way any investment property that has a tenant in there. Okay, the purchase and sale agreement doesn't go away. The lease agreement doesn't go away. The new owner now has to comply with it. Okay, so if I've got a tenant in my property and we're under contract that they've got the option to buy it in 3 years, who's the potential buyer for that property? Well, it's very unlikely to be somebody that intends to live in that property. And I think we all know owner occupants pay the most amount of money. Okay, so they're off the board. Investors are going to be the only ones that buy it. And what investors are going to want to buy that property that might get sold in 3 years or 2 years or 1 year, depending on where we are in that transaction? Okay, there may be investors out there that want a rental property Okay, and they're happy to buy a property that has a tenant in it because they're making cash flow off the property. But what investor wants to buy a property that somebody may buy away from them in 2 years for a price that's been determined already? Okay, well, the only one that's going to want to buy that is somebody that knows they're getting a great deal. Okay, if I could buy it for $250 today, and maybe the tenant buys it from me for $300 in a year, that might be interesting to me. Okay, and if they don't, then I've got a good property at $250,000 that I can now turn into a rental property, or I can sell for whatever market value is. Okay, if the tenant doesn't work out, but I have very few buyers. So if I need to get access to funds, my options are just very small. Okay, much smaller than even just your traditional rental property. Another reason that it's a negative for a seller is they're still a landlord. Okay, if their intention was, their hope was to sell the property, okay, and they're only going into a lease purchase because they couldn't get the price that they wanted for the property, well, now they're a landlord, and they've got collections they have to deal with, they've got repair calls that they have to deal with. They may not have wanted that. Why would you enter into an agreement to sell a property if or to rent a property if you didn't want to be a landlord? Okay, so if that wasn't their intention, that wasn't their hope, lease purchasing is not going to be the right thing for them. Okay, another reason that it's bad for sellers, probably not going to close. Okay, so again, if your intention was to sell the property and get rid of it, it's probably not going to close to whoever you lease purchase it with. Okay, at least a 90% chance. Now, if your intention was you wanted to be a landlord and you really didn't want to close the property, and you just want the extra money, that this may work for you. Okay, but I'm going to be advising every buyer not to lease purchase your property. Okay, so what's the better strategy for the seller? Either decide you're going to be a landlord and just rent it out. Okay, make your cash flow. You now have created exit strategies for yourself. Okay, because I can terminate the contract anytime I want to with 60 days notice. So if I do need to get access to those funds, I can either sell it as is, okay, with the tenant in place, and there's plenty of buyers out there that want rental property, or I can give that tenant notice that they need to vacate, and in 60 days from now, okay, if that's what I built into the contract, then I recommend that you would build that into the contract. 60 days from now, I've got a vacant property that I can now sell and take full advantage of wherever the market is. Okay, or sell it today for what market price is. Go ahead and get out of it. If you don't want to be a landlord, sell. Okay, really simple. Okay, so but don't get into the lease purchase business. It just usually does not work. Now for a buyer, what do we got to be thinking about for a buyer? So the pros for a buyer are, one, they're going to secure the property. If they know they found this house, they love it, they want it, they can't buy today, okay, but that's the house they want, a lease purchase might be a way for them to guarantee that they get that property. Okay. The second thing is they get to lock in the price today. Okay. We don't know what the market's going to do, go up or down. Okay. But if we can lock in a price today that we know this is what we'll be able to buy the house for in a year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time, that may be advantageous. Okay. So those are our pluses. Okay. The negatives are one you might guess wrong. And what do I mean by that? So let's unpack it for the buyer side, because the reasons here look very different than the seller side. I'm not going to buy this property for 3 years or 2 years. Okay. Do I know today what my life is going to look like in 2 years? Okay. Here I've put extra money down. I'm paying extra money every month. And sometime over the next 3 years, I have a death in the family. I get married or divorced. I get a new job. The neighborhood changes and is maybe headed in the wrong direction. Instead of being mostly owner occupants, it becomes mostly rentals, and it's really transient, and people aren't taking care of the property the way they want to. I might not want to buy that house in 3 years. And I'm going to end up giving up that extra money I paid. Okay. My option money that I paid up front and the money I paid every single month is just money that's gone. Okay. Because I don't want to buy. Okay. Or I can't buy. Okay. And that's something that we see happen a lot. People have a tendency to be very optimistic, and particularly buyers. And that their credit's not where it needs to be, and they don't have the money saved up that they need to have saved up. Well, the big question that I would want to ask as their agent before ever getting them into a lease purchase is, you haven't been able to get your credit where it needs to be. You haven't been able to save up the money you need to save up. What's different now, or what's going to be different over the next 3 years that you are super confident that you're going to be in the right position to do it? Okay. Because everybody has the best intentions, but life has a tendency to get in the way. The added expense of the extra rent every month, and the fact that you are probably lease purchasing at the top of your budget, is going to make it extra hard for a buyer to set aside extra money to build up that nest that they need for their down payment. Okay. It's also more challenging for them to pay down their debt, build their credit, do the things that they need to. Often buyers that are in a bad position today are going to be in a bad position in 2 years or 3 years or 1 year, whatever that time frame is. So we really got to understand what it is that's going to change, that they know they're going to be in the right position. Okay. It's also a potentially risky proposition. And we see this happen less today than we have in years past. And there are safer alternatives that I'm going to go into. But one of the things I want you to remind you is, while you have put up extra money and you're paying extra money every month, okay, you're still renting a property. Okay. It's not your property yet. And that seller may have a mortgage on that property. Okay. They definitely have taxes on that property. Well, what happens if the owner stops paying that? Okay. You're under contract to buy it, but the owner doesn't make his mortgage payment. Okay. They got sick. They lost their job. They just decided they don't care. They moved out of the country, whatever the answer is. And they stop paying the mortgage, and the bank forecloses on the property. Okay. Or they don't pay their property taxes. Okay. And the property gets foreclosed on for that reason. What happens? All that extra money you paid is gone. You've got a contract with somebody to buy the property that no longer owns the property. Okay. And your money's in their account, and your money is spent. Okay. You have the same potential risks that you need repairs taken care of at the property. What if the landlord, the owner, the seller, doesn't make the repairs? Okay. Are you still going to buy the house? Okay. You put up extra money all along, but they don't have the money to make the repairs. It's a risk you have to be really comfortable with. You need to know that whoever owns that property has deep pockets. They're going to maintain the property properly. They're going to make their payments on the property properly. They're going to pay their taxes properly. Because if they don't, you could see yourself taking a major loss. And that's just a risk I'm not comfortable putting buyers in. Okay, which is the next one. You still have a landlord. Okay, you have limited options, at least for the next 2 or 3 years, as far as what you can do with the property, and you're still dependent on that landlord to fix the dishwasher when it goes bad, to replace the water heater, to make sure that the gutters are clean and all of that. And there are both good landlords and there's bad landlords out there. Okay, but if I'm locked in to a 3-year contract and I've put extra money down and I'm paying extra money per month, how easy is it to walk away? Okay, if I'm just in a typical lease agreement, yeah, I've got my security deposit of 1 month's rent. Um, but the landlord doesn't do what they're supposed to. The landlord gets in trouble financially. Okay, that's an easy transaction for me to walk away. I don't have 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 of dollars tied up with that property that is going to be crippling for me to walk away. Lastly, it probably won't close. So as a buyer, why would you go into a contract knowing it's probably not going to close? And it could be for any one of these reasons. Okay, you didn't get your credit where it needed to be. You didn't save up enough money. The property either increased or decreased in value and doesn't work anymore for you. You no longer are interested in the property because of what the neighborhood has changed to, because you now work someplace else, because the house no longer fits your family because you've had 2 more children and you need another 2 bedrooms than that house has. It doesn't matter what the reason is, it doesn't close. It doesn't close. And here you've spent extra money over all this time. So for a buyer, it just doesn't make sense to get into a lease purchase unless you are absolutely confident you are talking about the right house that's going to be the right fit at some point in the future. You are confident that the price you're guessing today is going to be the right price at some point down the future. So you've got to be in a position to buy. It's got to be the right property for you to buy, and everything come together just perfect. Okay. If not, if you're not that confident, okay, and the only way I could tell, I think the only way you can be that confident if it's a very short term. Okay, you're 6 months away, at most 12 months away from being able to do it, and you have a track record already established of improving, then maybe this works for you. Okay, but otherwise, just go rent and rent below your budget. Okay, that's where a lot of renters go wrong. Is of course we all want to have really nice lifestyles, and we want a really nice place to call home, and so they'll go rent the most expensive home they can get into, and what does that do to their budget? It doesn't leave extra money for them to save up. It doesn't leave extra money for them to pay down debt and build their credit. So the best strategy is, and be it a 12-month strategy, a 24-month strategy, go rent below your budget. Okay, you can afford to rent a house for $1,800. Go find one for $1,300, and set $500 aside every single month. Okay, that's $12,000 you now have for a down payment on a house, to pay for closing costs, or money you could pay down the debt you have to improve your credit score. That's a much better strategy. So rent below the budget, and when you get in a position to buy, get yourself pre-qualified and go find the right house and buy then. Okay, that's almost always the better strategy. But if you have a buyer that insists that lease purchasing is the right solution for them, I don't want you to take them to Mr. Smith or Mr. Johnson's home that they've put up for lease purchase, or to the guy that sticks the handwritten sign on the street corner that says rent to own. Okay, because we don't know their financial security. We don't know how well they're going to take care of their property. We don't know if they're going to make the mortgage payments on the property. One of the things that's popped up over the last couple of years are these large companies like both Divvy and Home Partners of America, okay, that they are in the business. They want to help people get into homes, okay? That's their business model. And so they're going to pre-screen people, okay? So they're going to apply with Divvy. They're going to apply with Home Partners of America. They're going to pull their credit. They're going to look at their income. They're going to look at their assets. And the company's going to decide, you know what? This person is a good risk. We're willing to bet that they're going to be able to buy a home in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, okay? And again, I don't like that 3 year. I really, if they're more than a year away, I still think it's a bad idea. But again, if they're insistent, get them to apply with one of these companies, and there will be more that are coming into our marketplace. Okay, get them to apply. So they go apply with Home Partners America. Home Partners America does the research on them, says you're approved. Okay, we will buy a home for you for $320,000. Okay, and you get to pick the home, and then we will rent the property to you. Okay, until you're in a position you can buy. And we will work out and agree on what that purchase price is going to look like. We'll work out and agree what the down payment's going to be and what the extra monthly is going to be. Okay, that protects your client, because you know Home Partners of America and Divvy have deep pockets. So if there's repairs that need to be done, they're going to get done. They're going to own the homes outright because they pay cash for them. So there's no mortgage or anything that you have to worry about anybody getting foreclosed on. Okay, and the benefit of working with these companies for you as an agent, okay, above and beyond protecting your client, okay, that's first and foremost. Protect your client, okay. But if I go to Mr. Smith or Mr. Johnson with my client who wants a lease purchase, okay, remember it's two contracts. It's a lease and it's a purchase agreement. Well, today they're going to pay me on the purchase or on the lease, okay? Which, how do leases pay? Very tiny, right? Small pay. If that property sells in 2 years or 3 years, and what's the likelihood of that happening? Small. That's when you get the commission as a real estate agent on the big purchase, okay? So the added plus of working with Divvy or Home Partners of America is they become your client. When your buyer gets approved with Divvy, okay, and Divvy says we'll go buy the home for you, Divvy becomes your client. Your buyer picks the property that Divvy's going to buy, okay, but Divvy becomes your client, and you go negotiate the contract, go through the whole process just like you would with any other buyer, and you get paid at the closing table for the purchase when Divvy acquires the property. Okay, there is no waiting a year, 2 years, or 3 years. Okay, the rest of the transaction, the lease and the contract that goes with the lease and the future purchase, that's a private transaction between your buyer and Divvy, or your buyer and Home Partners of America. You're out of the picture at that point. Certainly, we still want you to build the relationship, be an advocate, all of that, but that contract you're not a party to. Okay, you're not their agent. You're not going to get a paid commission when they finally close on that property. You already got paid. Okay, you're just there as a consultant, an advisory position, or not. I mean, obviously you don't have to maintain that relationship, but you know this is a relationship business, so we're going to encourage you to do it. but you got paid. They're in the house that they want to be in. They have a contract to buy it at some point in the future at a predetermined price. They know what their rent is. They're right where they wanted to be. The added benefit for them is they got to pick the house. Okay, they got a budget and they got to go pick the best house for them. Not they went looking for properties that offered a lease purchase and picked the best lease purchase that was out there for them. No, they went and found the lease purchase and then went and found the property. Okay, I like that model so much better. Okay, so I hope you guys understand, and I encourage you, if you're thinking about this and you're curious, load those documents that we looked at the very beginning. Okay, the lease purchase exhibit and the lease for lease purchase agreement. Okay, and look at the extra fees that are in there and how those deals are set up, because I keep mentioning that the buyer pays extra money up front and they pay extra money every single month. Well, I want you to understand why that makes sense. Okay, when the seller has less options, when the seller is handcuffed by that lease purchase agreement, they deserve some compensation, right? I'm going to take away my opportunity to sell my property for market market value for the next 3 years. If you're asking me to do that, do I deserve some compensation for that? Okay, think of it like a earnest money deposit. Okay, except for it's non-refundable. Okay, so very often that money up front is $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 that somebody's paying up front to say, I want the exclusive right to buy this property for the next 3 years. Okay, now that money goes toward their purchase. Okay, but that's a chunk of money that they've now put at risk, and the only way they ever see value out of that money again is if they buy the property. Okay, and then every month there's a decision that this is how much market rent is. Okay, if I were just renting this house out, I would be able to rent it out for $1,400 a month. Okay, well, how much do you want to put toward the purchase every single month? Okay, and that could be $100, it could be $200, it could be $300, but let's just say it's $200 a month that you're putting in there. Well, now you're paying $1,600 a month in rent on a house that you could have normally rented for $1,400. Okay, and you're paying that every single month, and that $200 goes toward your purchase if you purchase. If you don't, the owner keeps that money. Okay, so it can wind up being really costly. And thinking about your buyers, they're already in a financial crunch, right? They either don't have cash or they don't have good credit, and now they're spending more money on a product than they should. Okay, that they're likely never to own. Okay, it's just a bad situation. So I hope this makes sense to you. I hope this makes the explanation easy for you to have with your clients. I encourage you, look into Divvy, look into Home Partners of America, get to know their format, their structure, if they have any programs for sending referrals, because you have prospective buyers coming to Divvy and coming to Home Partners of America directly without going through an agent, and they need agents. So if you can get into their partnership programs to where you get some leads from that, there may be some potential value there for you. Okay, but any other questions about lease purchase, call me, text me, email me. Happy to walk you through it, happy to explain it. And otherwise, guys, go crush it. We'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.